Joe always said, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And he was both. And I think you all agree to that.
He turns people into stars and stars into people, and everyone knew him.
I can't imagine a celeb being like a real person like Joe Franklin.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody, a very cordial welcome to our Joe Franklin TV show every day for 90 minutes. We have open house. We chit-chat. We try and keep it informal and relaxed, and it's fun.
Anytime I was feeling down, I would call him just so he would say some great words to me and bring me up. And he always did.
If he could help you in any way, he found a way to do it.
He was a great inspiration to young people, to old people, and as I say, he very cleverly stayed away from politics. Smart man.
Yes. He's known for being with radio and television and just being a pioneer, but what transcends all of that is that he was a person. He was lovely. He was just a great guy.
He didn't have a bad word for anybody. He was encouraging, he was supportive, he was kind, and he was generous, as long as you brought your own half a sandwich.
What Joe really was grease paint in his veins, gypsy in his soul, and sawdust in his britches. He came from the old school. He came from when show business was really show business.
I was doing a tribute to Tony Bennett at that time. It was approximately 16 years ago, I can pinpoint it. And it was his 50th year in show business. And Joe came to my performances. He always was there. Anytime I asked him, he was there. Anytime I asked him anything, he would do it. He was just that great a guy. Anyway, Joe and I we got together for a show on Saturday night. The Bennett show at St. Peter's Jazz Church was going to be a week Sunday, and he was to promote it. And he was doing a very nice job talking about Tony. He played a couple CDs of mine, and then he picked up the conversation. He said, "Tell me now," he said, "you know, I want you to know Tony never misses a show. He never misses a show. He sees it all the time. He loves it, and it's great that you're doing a tribute to him." And he said, "Look, what do you want me to play?" Now, I was there for one reason, to promote the show, Tony Bennett Show. So I said, I was about to say Tony Bennett, and he picks up an LP with Frankie Lane's picture on the cover. And he says, so I said, "Frankie Lane, you know, wrong show at the wrong time." So then he says, "Give me a little bit of Frankie Lane." So I went, "To spend one night with you in Joe's old rendezvous and serenade with you, that's Joe's desire."
Every week he would say, "Call me back 2 o'clock. Good news, you'll be on, you'll be on."
Every time I talked to him on the phone, he would say, of course, "Call me next Tuesday."
Next Thursday. Oh.
So I'm telling all my friends, "Wow, this famous guy told me to come back tomorrow." So I go back tomorrow, and he looks at me and, tomorrow, something came up. "Tomorrow, come back tomorrow. I'm going to have some really good news for you."
Well, like everybody else, call me Thursday, 1 o'clock, call me Tuesday, 3 o'clock, this o'clock.
Well, after a year of calling him back, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, "Talking about you on the other phone right now, good news." I finally got on the show, thank you.
After about the 8th time, I come in his office, and he stops and looks at me really seriously. He says, "Come over here and sit down. You know, you keep coming back here, and you know, it kind of impresses me. You know, so I tell you what, I can't put you on my show, but I'm going to get you some exposure." So he picks the phone up and calls Dick Rothman, who else know him, and says, "Hey, I'm sending this guy over here to be on your show." So anyway, my first TV guest spot goes to Joe Franklin.
He was a nostalgia buff, and he had a memory like a tack. You couldn't play trivia quiz with him, forget it.
He was like a walking library, like Milton Berle or Mickey Rooney. They knew every act that played every theater, no matter what year.
Franklin.
Okay, Joe. Who played Gene Simmons' parents in The Actress?
Gene Simmons' parents and the actress.
Right. Movie The Actress.
Teresa Wright.
Yes, yes.
Spencer Tracy.
Hey, very good.
Great.
The first time I heard a man say, "My pleasure might fill my honor," I was like, is this guy kidding me?
When it came to Joe, he always found a way to say yes, no matter what you asked him, literally.
I worked with the International Foundation for Immigrants, and I went to Joe and I asked him, I said, Joe, would you come and speak for us? He said, well, what's the date, what's the time? And I gave the information to him. He's like, well, we'll just hop on in a taxi and go on over there. And he showed up for more than 136 countries.
When I first started my advertising agency 40 years ago, and I had no money, no accounts, no nothing, I was working out of my house, he did a commercial for me. He found a way for Garden State Tire, I don't know if they exist anymore, but he did a TV commercial for me. Then I asked him to take a client on his show as a guest appearance. So he took Cy Sperling from Men's Hair Club on the show. Then 40 years later, I'm making movies now, and I asked him to be interviewed for a documentary for Irving Fields, who's now 99 years old. And he did it without any reservation. So I think that's, for me, that's the most memorable thing about Joe Franklin. He found a way to say yes.
One of the things I liked most about Joe was he was very, very supportive. You didn't have to have any talent, and he would tell you that you did.
He took me underneath his wing, and I would call him every other week. I go see him every other month, every 5 to 6 weeks at his office, and he'd sit me down and he'd give me a lot of advice.
When I went into the office, I finally started understanding like who Joe Franklin was.
And anybody who goes to his office knows that nobody's there. He's going to use you to be a secretary, answering his phone.
His door was open, and everyone loved the idea of his office was sort of like therapy. There was a place to go and talk and tell jokes and sing songs. And he'd put you on the air sometimes, even if you weren't famous.
He just took a total stranger, and granted I was, young or whatever, but took a total stranger into his office, took him right in the building, took me to the broadcast, said, sit down.
I go into Joe's office like everyone here. And of course I do impressions, I sing jazz and tap dance and clown. And I say, Bob, can you tell me the story about, when you were with Bob Hope? And you do Bob Hope spats. Hi, this is Bob I Love, thanks for the memory. Yes, Memory Lane, Joe Franklin, Hope.
So I started as a fan, as I said, and ended up as a friend. And a lot of us have experienced the same thing.
He was always such a wonderful man, but he would always say the same thing again. He'd look at me and go, remind me again how I know you. And I would go, I'm Nancy Lombardo. And then he would remember everything about you. And then he'd go, Nancy Lombardo, you're the lady who does comedy about moms. You like mom comedy. You're momedy, right? I go, that's me, Joe. And he would do that over and over again.
My late husband's name was Arthur Shimkin. He was had created Golden Records. And Joe and I used to talk about Arthur. And every time I spoke to him, I told him a story about Arthur with Irving Berlin once. And he never forgot the story. But every time I called him, he'd say, how's your husband Irving?
My father had passed away in '99. And I was trying to explain to my cousins that he loved all the old songs like Heart of My Heart and That Old Gang of Mine, and I had put a nice wreath on it that said Heart of My Heart, and I was explaining to him that it meant that old gang of mine, Pop was referring to his family that had passed on. So a year later, unfortunately, my cousin Joey, who I was telling this story to at my father's wake, he passed away. And that same day we buried him, I was at Joe Franklin's radio show to do the annual Academy Awards trivia, because the Academy Awards were the next day. So while I was waiting in the booth, at the last minute, Joe decided to throw on one disc from all his piles of different recordings. And I'm sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting to go on. And he gives the engineer the disc, and he plays a song from, and Joe is relating how this is a performer who was very famous in the 1930s, and nobody remembers him anymore. And the three songs, it was a medley on that record, were Heart of My Heart, That Old Gang of Mine, and If I Had My Life to Live Over. and I nearly fell out of the chair.
And God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for loving Joe Franklin. He's the greatest. Joe, this is for you, buddy.
You must remember this. Oh, Kiss is still a Kiss. A song is still a song. Now the fundamental things of life as time goes by.
And I always loved Joe Franklin and the times that I was with him, and I'm just going to carry his words of wisdom with me.
I will miss him terribly, but I know he's in all our hearts, and thank you all for being here and sharing it.
He was just a great person, and he's always going to be in my heart, and I miss you, Joe.
And it's so wonderful that all of you came out to share this wonderful energy.
He was a great, good heart and a good soul, and we all are here and honored to know him.
So I'm just going to miss Joe a whole lot.
We don't have any studio audience at all, but I want to ask my immediate crew, how do you feel about Louise Reiner? How do you feel about you? That's my first standing ovation in 28 years.
You must remember this. A case of do or die. Joe Franklin, we love you.
As I was leaving, I handed him my business card and I said, Joe, I own a recording studio. Anytime you need to record any interviews or do anything last minute or whatever, it's my pleasure, no charge. Those are the two words that kept us together for many, many years.
I guess there are no words to say. He was Joe Franklin. I guess that's the best way you can really describe him.
I miss him. We're going to all miss him.
As time he never left us. He's always going to live inside us. Go